Some ammunition is designed with good intentions. Some of it is pure marketing hype. And some rounds are just so misunderstood, they end up banned before most shooters even get a chance to run them. Once the news cycle grabs onto a story, you can watch shelves empty overnight. It doesn't matter if the design actually works as advertised. What matters is the narrative. And in America, we've seen defensive ammo outlawed, not for what it does in real life, but for what politicians think it does. Today we're breaking down 8 of the most controversial defensive loads that got hammered with restrictions across different states. And spoiler alert, it's rarely about terminal ballistics. It's almost always about bad legislation and worse headlines. We're going to cover everything from Teflon-coated .38 special rounds that lawmakers swore could cut through Kevlar like butter, to 5.56 NATO incendiaries that will set more than just steel plates on fire, and even hollow points with polymer jackets that somehow wound up on Kansas's official armor-piercing list. Yes, Kansas. No, that's not a joke. We'll also walk through the era of gimmick explosive-tip projectiles from the mail-order catalog days, Glaser Safety Slugs engineered with air marshals in mind, and frangible loads that the FBI actively trains with, but still get banned at some public ranges. If you've ever wondered how ammo becomes illegal, not because of performance, but because of how poorly lawmakers understand firearms tech, this one's for you. And by the end, you may want to check your own state's penal code before you pick up that next box at the shop. Let's rewind to the early 1960s. 3 cops working out of a garage developed what became the KTW round. It used a hardened core, wrapped in nylon, later finished with a Teflon coat. The purpose wasn't Hollywood armor piercing, it was simply to protect the rifling in their .38 special revolvers while running barrier drills. At that point in history, soft body armor wasn't even on the radar. But in 1982, NBC ran their infamous Killer Bullets special, and overnight the green-tipped KTW was painted as the ultimate cop killer's cartridge. Almost immediately, states like Alabama, Hawaii, North Carolina, and South Carolina rushed bans into law. Here's the irony: Teflon actually increased friction against Kevlar, meaning it reduced penetration through soft armor, not enhanced it. But the headlines were enough to seal the deal. Today, collectors will pay over $200 for a box of 20, about $10 every time you squeeze the trigger. Not because the performance is groundbreaking, but because the round became part of law enforcement history. The truth is, just about any full-powered hunting cartridge you'll find at a Walmart shelf will punch through a soft vest with ease. But because they don't have a scary name or a green tip, they remain completely legal. Even the engineers behind KTW made it clear Teflon wasn't about armor defeat. It was there to reduce barrel wear when firing hardcore projectiles through duty guns that were already underpowered. A solution for barrier penetration ended up outlawed because perception won out over physics. Now let's talk about the 5.56 NATO Heavy Incendiary. Jump onto EMAC Tactical's site and you can still order a 10-round bag for just under $40. Each 55-grain pill carries a compound that burns north of 30,000 degrees Fahrenheit when it smashes into steel, dry wood, or brush. They're spectacular for tearing up junkyard metal, but they're also wildfire nightmares. That's why states like California, Florida, Maryland, Illinois, and Missouri flat out ban them. The official reasoning is simple: fewer fireballs, fewer emergencies. But here's the contradiction. In plenty of Midwestern states, civilians can still legally light up the night with 50 cal tracer ammo. Meanwhile, a shooter in Sacramento can't even touch a 10-pack of Incendiary 5.56. Drop one on a steel target at dusk and the sparks alone are enough to get you trending on social media. But don't expect a judge to laugh it off when you tell him, "Relax, it was just for content." These are classified as exotic ammunition, and EMAC Tactical is one of the last places still shipping them to civilians in limited quantities. They come in plain polybags now instead of flashy packaging, partly to keep costs low and partly to avoid attracting the exact same attention that got earlier versions banned. Make no mistake, every one of these will ignite surrounding material on impact. They're not just flashy range candy. At that heat and velocity, they're a very real hazard. And that's exactly why they sell out the second they go live online. Federal's Syntech defense line runs about $50 for a box of 50. That works out to roughly $1 per trigger pull, solid mid-tier pricing in today's market. What you're getting is a 138-grain segmenting hollow point. It wears a bright blue polymer jacket, built around a reduced lead core. On impact with soft tissue, the center section tracks 12 to 18 inches through ballistic gel. Meanwhile, 3 sharp petals shear away, carving secondary wound paths up to 6 inches deep. Performance is consistent, clean, and backed by a lead-free primer perfect for indoor ranges. On paper, this is smart engineering. But here's the snag. States like Kansas and Oklahoma treat anything with a polymer jacket and a mostly non-lead core as armor-piercing. That definition sweeps in Syntech defense, even though gel results put it on par with the federal HST. The round was designed to reduce ricochets, reduce residue, and shoot cleaner indoors. Instead, outdated legal language from the 1980s flips it into the restricted column. Unlike the older bans that specifically targeted steel core penetrators, these newer rules focus strictly on materials. Doesn't matter how the bullet actually behaves. The label says polymer, and that's all some lawmakers need to hear. The irony? The exact traits that make this line safe for schools, indoor ranges, and even law enforcement training non-toxic primers, reduced fouling, and controlled fragmentation are the same things that land it in a legal gray area. Built for responsible shooters, outlawed by poor wording. Now let's jump to the collector's market. Head over to collectibleammunition.com and you might spot factory-sealed 10-packs of Velx red-tipped 30 carbine exploders about $100. Or maybe a 12-round box of 38 Special Plus P exploders from Bingham, pushing $125. Crack one open, and you'll find a cavity packed with a grain or two of flash powder. On impact, that tiny charge pops, splitting the jacket and scattering fragments into soft tissue. Florida, Illinois, and Missouri all outlawed them decades ago, branding them as needless cruelty. And realistically, they're not a serious defensive tool. They're novelties, range stunts, maybe pest control fodder. But under the law, possession is possession. A collector driving through St. Louis with one of these tucked in the glove box could end up trying to explain to an officer that it's an oddity for his shelf, not a bomb in his trunk. Both Velx and Bingham leaned hard on shock marketing. Labels read exploder and detonating tip, designed to hook gun show browsers. The actual payload, barely stronger than a party popper. But because the projectile contains a pyrotechnic component, lawmakers treat it like a destructive device. Intent doesn't matter. Performance doesn't matter. Once the statute lumps it in with explosives, you're looking at the same paperwork as if you had a box of grenades. Now let's talk New Jersey. When it comes to ammo laws, the Garden State is still stuck in the Victorian era. On the books, they still ban what they call Dum-Dum rounds. That phrase dates back to the British Dum-Dum arsenal in Calcutta, where soldiers clipped the tips off .303 British bullets to make them yaw harder in flesh. Here's the problem. Modern statutes in New Jersey interpret that wording so loosely that anything more aggressive than a full metal jacket could technically qualify. That means if you took a .223 Remington and scratched an X into the tip with your pocket knife, you've now manufactured a prohibited round. Never mind that it usually just blows the core out and locks up your bolt. In the eyes of Trenton, you've created a killer. And it doesn't stop there. Hollow points are only legal under a few specific conditions inside your home, in transit to the range, or while hunting. Stop at a convenience store on the way back from the range, and suddenly every round in your mag could be a separate charge. Even polymer-tipped or soft-point defensive ammo can get flagged, depending on how an officer or prosecutor interprets the statute. The phrase dum-dum has zero meaning in modern ballistic science, but it still carries legal weight, and that's what matters in court. The kicker? Expansion ammo hollow points, polymer tips, controlled expansion designs are the standard across law enforcement and civilian concealed carry nationwide. They exist to stop threats faster and reduce overpenetration. But in New Jersey, the safest option for bystanders is often the least safe option for the shooter. You're legally better off with full metal jackets. That's how far behind the times their laws are. Crack open SBR armor-piercing catalog and it reads, less like a price sheet and more like a metallurgy textbook. We're talking tungsten carbide-loaded 5.56, hardened steel core 300 blackout, even depleted uranium loads in 338 Lapua Magnum. Every single one is hand-inspected, built for specific missions like vehicle disablement and barrier penetration. And here's the kicker: none of these are available to the general public. SBR deals only with the military, law enforcement, and foreign contracts. But Maryland lawmakers didn't stop there. They banned possession of any projectile with a core made from tungsten, beryllium, copper alloys, brass, steel, or uranium. The reasoning is, keep armor piercing off the streets. In reality, it often trips up private security officers or hobby reloaders who unknowingly build cartridges using surplus pull-down components. Walk into a Maryland range with the wrong bullet in your bag, and you're holding a felony. Price isn't the barrier, it's not factory ammo you're buying. These components trade hand to hand. Loose tungsten core .308 Winchester projectiles run about $3 a piece if you know the right source. These aren't plinking rounds. They're designed to punch windshields, defeat hardened targets, or take out engine blocks. SBR API loads armor-piercing Incendiary represent the bleeding edge of small arms lethality. But in Maryland, none of that matters. Doesn't matter if it's loaded, stripped, or sitting in your reloading drawer. The law judges the metal, not the mission. No context, no nuance, just a hard line in black ink. Now rewind to the 1970s. Federal air marshals needed a handgun load that wouldn't risk punching through an airplane fuselage. That led to the Glaser Safety Slug. Picture a lightweight copper cup, packed with number 6 or number 12 birdshot. It's sealed under a colored polymer tip, usually blue or silver. An 80-grain 9mm Glaser moves close to 1,500 feet per second. When it hits, the slug comes apart fast, leaving a shallow, wide wound cavity, while minimizing the chance of overpenetration. It even stops short inside drywall. Today, retail sits between $20 and $40 for a 20-round box, but not everyone embraces them. Some indoor ranges ban Glazers, worried about copper fragments damaging HVAC systems or ricocheting in old stalls. And plenty of concealed carry instructors advise against them, pointing out that a winter coat or forearm can cause premature breakup dumping that birdshot before it reaches anything vital. Legally, they're available almost everywhere, but in court, optics matter. Prosecutors have held up a spent Glaser jacket to a jury and painted it as reckless intent, not responsible defense. If you carry them, you better be able to articulate why. Still, the Glaser earned loyal fans. Back in the controversial Strasbourg tests, goats reportedly dropped faster to Glaser loads than to most standard handgun ammo. The ethics and methodology of that study are still debated, but it built a cult following. Marshall and Sanau's stopping power data shows mixed outcomes, sometimes lightning fast, sometimes lackluster, depending on whether the slug held together long enough to reach the chest cavity. For years, certain police officers carried them inside hospitals and courtrooms, where the priority was stopping a threat without risking pass-throughs. Now over to Green Match. 50 rounds of 125-grain 40 Smith & Wesson copper-poly frangibles cost just under $37. Thanks to modern powder metallurgy, these rounds vaporize on steel. Yet in gel, they still drive 10 to 11 inches before breaking apart. Brands like Inceptor and Centerfire have advanced the design even further, sculpting copper-poly bullets that yaw violently and carve wide wound channels without the risk of penetrating walls. But old reputations die hard. Plenty of indoor ranges and instructors blacklist frangibles because they remember early versions that cratered backstops or ricocheted unpredictably. No state law bans them, but enough local rules treat them like hazardous waste that it's always smart to call ahead before you show up with a box. Here's the irony. The FBI, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and the U.S. Coast Guard all run frangibles in their CQB programs. Yet you could still get turned away at your local public range for bringing the exact ammo federal agents use every week. Performance? It's impressive. A federal HST 380 averages about 9.3 inches in gel. Meanwhile, Centerfire's 380 frangible hits over 11 inches, then disintegrates when it touches studs, bone, or drywall. And it's not just test media. Hunters have dropped feral hogs and whitetail deer with these copper-poly loads. They hit hard, dump energy fast, shred vitals, and never leave an exit wound. And that closes out the series. 8 unusual cartridges that wound up banned, restricted, or simply misunderstood into obscurity. Got a box of these sitting in your stash? Ever run them at the range? Drop your story in the comments, I want to hear it. And while you're down there, hit like, share this with your buddies, and subscribe for more deep dives like this. Tap the bell icon so you never miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay sharp, and shoot straight.